Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun. All right, guys. Today's date, August 28th, 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense of it all. Before we do get started, guys, let you know that we do try to pride ourselves on being a news podcast. What does that mean? That means that we only source from the most reputable news sites, web blogs, and things of that nature with award-winning journalism. We do not do sensational news like Fox News, The Blaze, The Daily Beast, whatever show Glenn Beck is on, or Ben Shapiro, or Candace Owens. We simply don't do that. We give you the facts, nothing but the facts. Aside from that, guys, we do try to watch our language, but hey, let's be honest, words do fly. At the same time, guys, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome. So we might as well go ahead and get into it, guys, because there's actually no other way to say it. Because again, we have to start with Mr. Convicted Felon himself, who can't go anywhere without bringing attention to himself, even at a funeral.
Tonight, the Trump campaign is defending the candidate's Monday visit to Arlington National Cemetery, now being criticized for politicizing America's war dead on hallowed ground.
What a horrible day it was.
The campaign on Tuesday posting this TikTok highlight video of Trump's trip, showing him laying a wreath in honor of the service members killed at Abbey Gate in Afghanistan, and posing with family members among the gravestones. Several campaign staff posting their own content, too.
It's disrespectful. It's not Disney World. It's Arlington National Cemetery, and it should be respected as such.
The visit first drawing scrutiny after a reported altercation between campaign and cemetery staff over photography. The Trump campaign saying a staffer, quote, decided to physically block members of President Trump's team during a very solemn ceremony. A cemetery spokesperson writing, federal law prohibits political campaign or election-related activities within Army National Military cemeteries. Arlington National Cemetery reinforced and widely shared this law and its prohibitions with all participants. The Harris campaign calling it all a sad episode, saying Trump has a, quote, history of demeaning and degrading military service members. The vice president herself has not commented on the incident. Trump running mate J.D. Vance responding late today.
She wants to yell at Donald Trump because he showed up. She can go to hell.
Kelly Barnett invited the former president to Arlington. Her son, Marine Staff Sergeant Taylor Hoover, died at Abbey Gate.
What would you say to people who may be pro-Trump, anti-Trump, whatever their politics might be, who just feel like that's not a place for politicians or for politics?
I would have to say, are you in my shoes? I invited him. My son was murdered under the Biden-Harris administration.
Utah Governor Spencer Cox, attending with Trump, posting these photos. He later apologized for using them in a fundraising email. Garrett Haake, NBC News, Washington.
So what's crazy about this is, this should be, even for a convicted felon, this should be a slam dunk. Arlington National Cemetery, easiest way to show respect to our veterans, because, so if you believe, Trump, and if you believe conservatives, they support the troops, because they have somebody to fund play in their war somehow. But again, leave it to how many presidents have went to Arlington Cemetery without issue, and yet convicted felon Donald Trump has an issue because his entourage decided that they want a photo op. And again, to point this out, anything dealing with Trump is a photo op. And they're trying to make it seem like, they don't respect us and they don't respect the troops. And I'm thinking to myself, this really shouldn't even be news because Trump already has enough stuff going against him, and it's fun as hell to watch. But imagine that you are so bad at your job that literally going to something as simple as a funeral procession and you somehow make the news. But this is what happens when you let an idiot get into office and realizes, oh, this is what I can do with power. And yet, in such Trump fashion, can somehow make it about himself. On a day where they're supposed to be honoring soldiers who gave the ultimate sacrifice in service to their country, that orange douchebag still made it about himself. Bravo. Well, hopefully you can't make it about yourself again, Trump, because the special counsel that you wanted so long ago has just now charged you again.
Jack Smith filing a superseding indictment against the former president over his alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. While the original charges remain, Smith narrowed and revised his allegations against the former president, removing references to anything that might be considered official acts during his time in office. Online, Mr. Trump calling it the persecution of a political opponent. He has already pleaded not guilty to all of the charges. The new indictment comes on the heels of last month's bombshell ruling by the Supreme Court that found presidents enjoy broad immunity for official acts.
I'm immune from all of the stuff that they charged me with.
Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson among those who dissented, discussing the ruling in a new interview with CBS News.
I was concerned about a system that appeared to provide immunity for one individual under one set of circumstances.
The new indictment accuses Mr. Trump of using his campaign to spread lies that he knew were false, to create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger. That includes a now infamous call Mr. Trump made to Georgia's Secretary of State after losing the state to Joe Biden.
I just want to find 11,780 votes.
On certifying the election results, the special counsel refers to former Vice President Pence as acting in his role as president of the Senate, writing Mr. Trump had, quote, no official responsibilities, but did have a personal interest, and alleging he attempted to use a crowd of supporters on January 6th to pressure the vice president to fraudulently alter the election results.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Also this morning, NBC News has reviewed newly released video shot by Nancy Pelosi's daughter in the hours after the January 6th attack that HBO recently turned over to Congress. The House Speaker blasting Mr. Trump.
We take an oath to protect our country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. There is a domestic enemy in the White House.
That newly released Pelosi video also contains footage of the speaker wondering loud why the National Guard wasn't at the Capitol before the attack, which she also says she takes responsibility for the Guard not being prepared for more. But the D.C. National Guard is controlled by the federal government, meaning then President Trump himself would have had to order them out. Chanel?
All right, Garrett, thank you.
So what's crazy about this is two parts. Again, special counsel is coming forward and saying, okay, we're going to take the ruling that you basically gave us. And for the ruling that I'm talking about, guys, sometime last month, the Supreme Court had sat there and ruled that the president could be immune from acts while he was in office. Again, something that Trump was touting very loudly, like, I'm immune. I cannot be prosecuted. I'm immune. The Supreme Court said I'm immune. He pretty much ran with it. The problem is that now the special counsel, again in this case, Mr. Jack, had sat there and said, okay, we're going to revise this, but we're going to take out the fact, and this is from special counsel Jack Smith, by the way, we're going to take out the fact that it's not really you as a president that's doing this, because quite frankly, if we remove it, if we reframe the argument and say, we're removing it, that was part of your process or part of your behavior, then the Supreme Court ruling, ergo, doesn't apply to you. So what does that mean? That basically means that Trump is going to go on this whole thing. It's political prosecution. It's political prosecution. It's a witch hunt. Not guilty. MAGA, the usual. He's going to sit there, whine and complain. His lawyers are going to make their fourth Christmas by now on billable hours. Idiots are still going to be giving to his campaign, and folks are still going to be buying his merch. And the RNC is still going to be helping with the legal bills that his donations don't make up for. Now, the problem with all of these court cases, because he's got multiple ones out there, and yet somehow they've all been pushed back post-election. Either even the sentencing from his Manhattan case, which he was found guilty of, the sentencing has been paused post-election. So I can only assume that we're going to basically be adding this to the pile because, again, for some odd reason, and I still wait for someone to explain this to me, Trump is a private citizen. He's not a president anymore. Sure, he has a Secret Service detail. All former presidents and vice presidents and certain cabinet members, along with House and representatives, some of them keep their Secret Service details. Some of them, not all of them. But that being said, what's to keep him from not going to trial now? Because in our eye, in everybody else's eyes, he's no different from your ordinary American citizen. Now, had it been President Biden or Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, or it had been someone else that's or a Speaker of the House or the AG, those I can see that you have to go through a process because you're basically trying to remove somebody from a higher office. However, Trump does nothing more than wake up past 11 o'clock, still eats French fries, thinks he can golf, and is spouting his greatest hits and pretty much in touting fear tactics, which again, as we just saw in the previous video, sat there and told his insurrectionist mob on January 6th, if you don't fight for your country, it'll be taken away from you. How very terrorists. And the other part I want to get to is Miss Pelosi. Miss Pelosi had all the time in the world to call that convicted felon what he is, a domestic terrorist. The fact that, again, HBO caught this, or I should say her daughter caught this. HBO give this out. HBO made this public now. I just wonder, it's like with Pelosi, yeah, you had the opportunity to go to make an impact right there and call Trump what he was, an enemy of the state, and honestly still is. But we will follow that story as it goes along, guys. But I'm not feeling very positive that it's going to move forward to trial because, again, unless through some ungodly way or just things that doesn't make any sense, that Trump is reelected as president and we get an Act 2, those cases will disappear. But if Madam Vice President wins, all those cases are going to hit Trump simultaneously. I'm not wishing for the man's downfall. I'm just saying the Simpsons called it. I'm just waiting to see what happens. But I digress. But moving forward, guys, yes, we are in voting season. Less than 70 days now toward elections. And I keep saying this all the time. Vote. Go to vote.org. Go to vote.org and you can basically register to vote, see where you vote, what you need to bring to vote. Because the next story I'm going to talk about, which basically the Georgia new rules, the election. What you're about to hear for the next 2 minutes is one of the many reasons why I keep saying vote. Because if you don't, they'll try to find a way for you to make it hard to vote, for your vote to matter, to disenfranchise you, to dissuade you. And this new law that just passed in Georgia will do just that.
Yeah, the motion carries 3-2.
New Georgia election rules were passed in front of a crowd that was at times raucous. Donald Trump supporters, some wearing MAGA hats, on hand and vocal, cheering on the state election board's passage of a rule that has sparked new fears among voting rights advocates. Some state Democrats are concerned that partisan county board election members can now, in effect, reject an election outcome.
Give me the worst case scenario here of how this rule is applied.
So worst case scenario would be that we have a bunch of counties who, because they now have discretion to certify election results, causes massive delays, uncertainties, in which, again, the state of Georgia may not be able to meet the required deadlines for certification.
Democrat Sam Park, Georgia's House Minority Whip, says the rule has a potential of delaying the certification for the entire state of Georgia in 2024.
To pass a rule that creates such substantive change less than 100 days, that, I mean, how are you going to implement a rule that doesn't have guardrails? That what constitutes a reasonable standard?
They're doing a great job. 3 members.
The Republican members of the state election board were relatively unknown, but now they are front and center in changing Georgia's election rules.
I think the Board of Elections should be able to see every single election document in the office.
Rule changes pushed by Georgia's Republican-led state legislature after 2020 gave the board a facelift. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, often a public target of Trump, was removed as the election board chair. Meanwhile, Republicans Janelle King, Rick Jeffries, and Dr. Janice Johnston were appointed to their roles by the state legislatures and party.
Janice Johnson.
And Trump recently called them out by name at an Atlanta rally.
Saying our name and saying we're doing a good job doesn't mean anything. I mean, it just means we're doing a good job in his eyes.
You're operating in good faith, full stop.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Their mention by Trump has raised concerns among critics that they may be working directly with the Trump campaign, something board member Janelle King adamantly denied to CNN.
This is about protecting all voters. I am making sure that I do the right thing. I'm appreciative of the president's support, but I'm not working on behalf of anybody.
On Tuesday, 2 Republican former secretaries of state submitted a letter to the state election board, cautioning on the last-minute rule changes.
So here's the thing, and I say this with all the love in the world. I have love for the sisters, I do, but see this right here. I keep saying all the time. I keep saying all the time when it comes to black and conservatives or black conservatives or black Republicans. How do y'all exist? Number one, because I have sat there and said on this show, and will continue to sit there and say on this show, that the only way you could be black and conservative is that it's profitable. And I don't mean to put Miss King on blast, but you're part of 3 people who sat there and said, you know what? We want to give ourselves the ability to turn around and halt an election if we deem it unfair, if we want to go back and count the votes, whatever the reason being. You just empowered yourselves to do it. And again, this comes from a conservative-led state government in Georgia, from who basically Donald Trump can't help but shout you 3 out. And yet, I said this all the time about voting and election fraud and voter interference. Georgia right now is setting up the goalpost to where, and I'm just spitballing this out here. Remember, Georgia had a special election, voted blue, elected its first black senator since its inception into the United States. And now the fear is, according to conservatives, that Georgia will stay blue. So how do we combat that? We can't sit there and interfere with the voters. We can create new voting rules. We can purge voter rolls, so you have to register again. And you get individuals like Janelle King and the other 2 napkins that was with her, who somehow, some way, in a Republican supermajority, just empowered themselves to be basically voting watchdogs. But let's all be honest. Let's really be honest about all this. They're not really watchdogs. They're basically at the whim of Dorito if that convicted felon were to sit there and say that he won Georgia, and now you have a board of delinquents, which again may turn around there and say, well, no, we need to count the votes, or we'll say this is fraud, this is this. They could delay the count, which again can delay the electoral college votes to the president, whoever that president that may have won. But let's be honest, if it's Trump, they'll sweep it down. I don't see any problem. If it's Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, oh, we must look at every vote. Every vote counts, because that's the bullshit. Which it really is. Pardon my French. That's the bullshit. Now, the crazy part about all this is the fact that going back to where Trump, I'm sorry, I know Miss Davis is chomping at the bit to prosecute Trump on his federal interference in Georgia, because that call alone, you called the Georgia Secretary of State and sat there and said, is there any way that we can find 11,000 plus votes? How is that not interference? You're basically sitting there saying we must find the votes, and even called them and got on recorded audio. When that was what, going on almost 3 years ago now? Oh, well, almost 4 years ago now. Think about it. But again, the fact that you got him on recorded audio telling a Georgia representative to find more votes, how is that not election interference? That's the part I don't get. But let's go to JD Vance for a second, because again, unless you're a couch, you've got nothing to worry about. Because again, if you don't know the whole thing about JD Vance and the couch and his in a couch, well, I'll let you Google that and have fun with that. But going back to what he said about Kamala Harris, because again, they have nothing to go after. JD Vance has no dirt on Kamala Harris. Neither does convicted felon Donald Trump. And her running mate, Tim Walz, he can't attack him either on policy. So what do Republicans do when they do best? They basically assassinate the character and keep repeating themselves to make them sound sincere. Ergo, about to be hopefully failed, Vice President JD Vance.
Kamala Harris is so asleep at the wheel that she won't even do an investigation into what happened, and she wants to yell at Donald Trump because he showed up. She can go to hell.
I have two questions for you. One, could you tell us more about the altercation that happened at the Arlington Cemetery? And two, what does debate prep look like for yourself and for Trump at this time?
Well, I think, first of all, the altercation at Arlington Cemetery is the media creating a story where I really don't think that there is one. There is verifiable evidence. There is verifiable evidence that the campaign was allowed to have a photographer there. There's verifiable, they were invited to have a photographer there. There's verifiable evidence that the families of these poor people who had their loved ones die 3 years ago at Abbey Road, Abbey Gate, those 13 Americans, a lot of them were there with the president. They invited him to be there and to support them. That's not an insult to the memories of their loved ones. They wanted Donald Trump there, and thank God that we have a president who stands with our veterans instead of one who runs away from them. Now it is amazing to me that you have apparently somebody at Arlington Cemetery, some staff member, had a little disagreement with somebody, and the media has turned this into a national news story. You know what I think our veterans care a lot more about? That Kamala Harris's VP nominee lied about his military service. I think that our veterans care a lot more about that. And the other thing our veterans care a lot more about is that 3 years ago, 13 brave, innocent Americans died, and they died because Kamala Harris refused to do her job, and there hasn't been a single investigation or a single firing. I don't look, sometimes mistakes happen. That's just the nature of government, the nature of military service. But to have those 13 Americans lose their lives and not fire a single person is disgraceful. Kamala Harris is disgraceful. We're going to talk about a story out of those 13 brave, innocent Americans who lost their lives. It's that Kamala Harris is so asleep at the wheel that she won't even do an investigation into what happened, and she wants to yell at Donald Trump because he showed up. She can go to hell.
You know, this is why I sit there and I say a lot of times conservatives love the uneducated and the misinformed. Because JD Vance, again, this is why I sit there and say he can't find anything on Tim Walz. So what does he do? He attacks his record. Oh, well, he never really served. Yes, he served in the National Guard. That's kind of been put to rest about Governor Tim Walz's military record and the fact that he did serve in the National Guard. well, he left before his company went to Afghanistan, and so it's almost like he had stolen valor. Here's my thing, and I'm not trying to knock anybody who does service, whether it's reserves, whether it's National Guard, whether it's Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines. Again, if you decided to basically take the oath to defend America and its allies from all enemies, foreign and domestic, if you took that oath and you joined whatever branch you joined, including Space Force, which I'm still trying to figure out how that's still around, number one. But anyway, if you served, you served. Thank you for your service. Not everything has to be action deployed. And again, Vance doesn't seem to get it, but he has nothing to attack Tim Walz on. Oh, you're National Guard. You're not real armed services. Is an insult to anybody who's ever served the National Guard, because that's just as much armed forces as any other branch. Again, it makes no sense that, again, he has nothing to attack him on, but trying to start the narrative. And again, with Kamala Harris, well, Kamala Harris needs to answer for withdrawal from Afghanistan. Wait, what? Well, 13 members lost their lives in the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and Kamala Harris couldn't even stand up for it. This is why I say J.D. Vance loves, along with Trump, loves the misinformed, loves the ill-educated. Because anybody with a history book or 3 seconds on a Google search will be like, shouldn't you be kind of mad at President Biden because he actually approve the withdrawal from Afghanistan? Shouldn't you kind of be mad at him? But this is why I said the redirection. We have nothing to go after, so we have to attack their character. We have to make them seem like they're evil, like they don't care. We have to sit here and paint this picture, because if we do not, you will start looking at us and wondering, what are y'all doing? And again, Vance, unless he's, on a couch, Google search that if you want to, is character assassinating them. At the same time, anybody, again, with a Google search will be like, no, that's not right. That's not, you can't blame a vice president for something that the president actually sat there and said that he wanted to do, because we need to leave Afghanistan. We've occupied it long enough, and the same since we invaded Iraq. But I love the fact that he sat there and said all these things. I'm just like, you literally have nothing more to go off of outside that one time you talked about Mountain Dew and try to insult it. This is Trump's puppet. Basically, Trump if Trump was older and didn't have money. You have JD Vance. But that's not the only crazy thing that he said, because this thing about him and parents with children is really, really, really starting to get to that Law and Order Special Victims Unit level. Because again, he talked about an individual who did not have a child and questioned her judgment on children. You'll see what I'm talking about very soon.
So many of the leaders of the left, and I hate to be so personal about this, but they're people without kids trying to brainwash the minds of our children. And that really disorients me, and it really disturbs me. Randi Weingarten, who's the head of the most powerful teachers union in the country, she doesn't have a single child. If she wants to brainwash and destroy the minds of children, she should have some of her own and leave ours the hell alone.
So what's crazy is he literally sat there and said that this woman that he talked about, right, who basically, for lack of better words, I had to think about that. American Federation of Teachers. Sorry. So he basically said, well, she doesn't have a child, and what she's doing along with this union is trying to brainwash students. This is the times, if I'm interviewing if I had the, I say if I had the unfortunate time of interviewing somebody, I'd interview JD Vance and be, what do you mean by brainwash the students? Because I know where it's going to go. Oh, well, people who aren't parents just simply cannot make the decisions because they don't have the experience of raising a child. Okay, that the part that kills me is that he is so fixated on parents basically making decisions for children, and it's getting to the point to where I'm like, dude, you are creeping on SVU status. Like, if Criminal Minds need an unsub, JD Vance is in, because he always has this thing about people who are not parents and believe that, if you're not a parent, you can't make a great decision. You can't make decisions that will affect children's lives in the positive. And I'm just like, there have been plenty of individuals out there who are childless but still work with children, actually develop programs for children, actually try to help children, helping the next generation. And they did so without having a child of their own. That's completely effing fine. But in JD Vance's world, well, if you don't have children, you don't have experience. Thank you if Stepford Wives made a husband. But again, that's basically Trump without money. But we shouldn't be surprised by that as far as his level of how far he will go to say up and down that, children will be brainwashed by childless adults. Yeah, that doesn't scream pedophile at all. Not to say that JD Vance is a pedophile, and I'm not certainly saying that. I'm just saying that line that he's crossing is getting ever so closer. That's all I'm saying. But another thing we want to get to, guys, is that, of course, in Texas, Biden was pushing forward legal status to spouses of U.S. citizens. That, again, if they did marry U.S. citizens for this particular group, that the spouses would get U.S. citizenship. A judge in Texas decided that, no, I don't think Biden has the ability to do that. And actually has kind of put the kibosh on it for right now because, again, like all things, the president does not have the power to do this. And I'm just thinking to myself the entire time, it is amazing to me that, again, with most states that are trying to do something, you have it right here to where it can literally sit there and say, we're working on immigration. Here's our plan. And I have seen one party constantly put out plans for immigration and another party that has constantly shot down immigration, but still complained about still complained about the fact that we have an influx of immigrants coming into the States. That's like saying, hey, we have a broken faucet. We should fix it, but we're just going to put more towels underneath it so just mop it up. But it's still a problem. That's what the GOP is saying right now. And I always say it's best. If the GOP does have an immigration plan, we would love to hear it because the current system is broken. And even then, what President Biden was trying to do may help out a great number of immigrants. But it's amazing to me, like, how many more hoops does one have to jump through before we finally realize there is just one party out there that is against everything but rich old white men? Just saying. You would think Tim Scott and Byron Daniels would have found it the hard way. But I digress. Meanwhile, in Kentucky, it pains me to say this just because, again, this is involving Breonna Taylor and the fact of her death. And we also sat there and said that 2 of the officers falsified enough evidence to get a no-knock warrant. But then again, we all know the story. The no-knock warrant, no knock was applied. Breonna Taylor's boyfriend at the time thought that there was an intruder in the house, shot at them. They shot back. Fortunately, Miss Taylor is now dead. And at the same time, we kept on wondering because at the time, AG Daniel Cameron, also related to Mitch McConnell, by the way, decided to toss the entire case, saying that there wasn't enough to bring these officers forward. We did notice that, again, the AG at the time, Merrick Garland, did actually, did actually bring charges up at the time. And the 2 that were going to be put in, and this is the crazy part, that the police detective, Joshua James, and former sergeant, I have to go look at this one, Kyle Meany. So those 2 individuals keep in mind what I'm about to say. Those two individuals wrote and falsified a request for a no-knock warrant. So the entire thing from the get-go was BS, but still got it, right? This is where a judge in Kentucky, which is surprising, has sat there and said that even though the warrant itself and how it was obtained was all the way foul, because the boyfriend returned gunfire, the boyfriend fired first at the officers, which he believed to be intruders, was the whole entire reason that, hey, because he decided to defend his home, your crappy, corrupted, shady as hell path to getting a warrant has now been voided. These charges will now be dropped, which I think it's crazy that a judge would sit there and go, well, it's only because the boyfriend fired, and because the boyfriend fired at the cops, everything else is moot. Again, I will say this one. I always say this, and I'm yet to be wrong. Unless the crime is so heinous, unless the crime has enough public eyes on it, nothing gets done. Breonna Taylor, and again, to argue this, Breonna Taylor had the murder of Breonna Taylor had nationwide coverage, had discussions among everybody, and the officers were worried because, you know what, you actually might go to jail over this. Now, keep in mind, there's still other charges they're facing, but imagine being told that an action that was done by the boyfriend actually sprung you away from the shady police work that you're doing. And yet, all I can hear is Donald Glover's only, this is America playing. But we will follow that story as it goes along. Like I said, those charges regarding the warrant have been dropped. So now it just comes down to civil matter. But still, imagine that's a hell of a break. That's all I'm saying. A hell of a break. But switching gears, because again, inflation, or I should say, corporate profit disguises inflation because their prices go up and our paycheck remains the same. Two major grocery stores are going to do a merger. And the reason why it's bad, well, because we're approaching antitrust monopoly laws.
Grocery store giants Kroger and Albertsons in court today defending their plan to merge. The two companies announced what would be the largest supermarket merger in U.S. history back in October of 2022, but the Federal Trade Commission actually sued to block the deal, saying it would eliminate competition and raise our food prices. Let's bring in our business correspondent, Alexis Christoforous, for more. All right, Alexis, let's talk about what's at stake here. I mean, for both companies and also for consumers, because it would possibly mean that we'd be paying a lot more for our groceries.
Kira, look, this is a $25 billion merger, and the FTC says it is concerned it will not only mean possibly reduced competition, but higher grocery prices, which we know are up about 20% since 2020. They also say it could increase price fixing or price gouging in the supermarket industry, something that Kamala Harris and other policymakers have accused the industry of. That's when these big supermarket giants leverage their scale to get better deals from suppliers, but then they keep prices artificially high. The companies, for their part, argue this is actually going to help them rein in costs and better compete with the big rivals like Walmart and the big box chains like Costco. They also say they're not going to shut down stores. They're not going to put people out of work. And Albertsons and Kroger say they are the few that actually have unionized workers in their stores.
So what can we expect at the hearing today?
Well, this hearing should last about 2 weeks, actually, Kira, while the FTC tries to get this injunction put in place to stop the merger while it works its way through the courts. And by the way, about 40 witnesses, CEOs from both companies, going to be called to testify. And two other states, Colorado and Washington, have also brought suits of their own against these companies for this possible merger. Those are set to happen next month.
All right.
So I love the fact that, you know, again, because I've been around mergers before. Let me tell you something about mergers. Unless, you know, you feel free to join the choir on this one. Anytime that they say nobody losing their jobs when it comes to a merger should be full of shit. There's always reduction. Because in the corporate world, reduction means saving money. Saving money goes to shareholders. Keep shareholders happy, the money keeps flowing. That's how companies do it. At the same time, inflation prices. Because again, we are still in an inflation economy where prices are high. And the only ones right now that are moving truckloads of money and are happy about it are corporations and large scale businesses. Kroger's and Albertsons are just a few of them. So, of course, they're going to sit there and say, why don't we join forces? Because that means that by you joining forces and becoming one, that means that there's less grocery store chains out there, which means that you can set the prices however you feel. And folks, because again, you need food to survive, will have to pay that amount in order to keep your fridge full. That right there is price gouging if I ever did see one. At the same time, they're still trying to do it. I will give the FTC credit to try to block the merger. Will it end? Probably not. But at the same time, I hope it brings awareness that there really is price gouging going on, and these companies are getting away with it. That is the whole entire reason why we had certain protections and departments in place to make sure this never happened until convicted felon Dorito decided to remove them all. Why? Because he wanted to make the playlist a lot easier for his friends. But I digress. Moving forward, Mark Zuckerberg, as I usually call the guy that has nothing better to do, but unfortunately his platform is still huge that people stop to use it, decided that he wanted to unburden himself about the COVID-19 issues that he was pressured into doing by the U.S. government.
Pointing fingers at the Biden administration over COVID-19. The head of Facebook and Instagram's parent company, Meta, says in 2021, he was pressured to censor social media content about the pandemic. The comments came in a letter that Zuckerberg sent to the House Judiciary Committee. Zuckerberg specifically mentions posts that Meta classifies as humor and satire. He says he regrets censoring content and that he would push back if he was asked to do it again. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us now.
So I had to stop it right there because, again, he was pressured by the White House to censor COVID-19 data. Okay. So in COVID-19, for all those that don't remember, because it was only just a few years ago, and yet we feel ourselves kind of going back again. But it is amazing to me that, again, this was in 2021 that Zuckerberg was saying, oh, the Biden administration wanted Facebook to be censored about COVID-19. And really, we shouldn't have done that. Yes, you should have. Because if you didn't, I'll tell you, I use this as an example. If Zuckerberg did not censor COVID-19 material that wasn't from the CDC and was just put out for the world to see, you would basically have what True Social is right now. You would, because again, the whole thing with COVID-19, it was new. No one knew how to treat it. It was still a lot of things going on, and yet you had the stupidity people. Oh, well, just drink bleach. I wonder who said that one. Oh, just take ivermectin. Ivermectin will prevent you from getting COVID-19, which you shouldn't. That's for animals. And there was like 100 different other things out there regarding COVID, and yet you didn't see them on Facebook. Why? Because we didn't need idiots turning around and going, oh, well, that's also on Facebook. Maybe I should try it. Drinking bleach. Yeah, I highly wouldn't recommend that. Just saying, because it's bleach. Or ivermectin. Taking something that's for animals and you decide in your system because someone told you it basically can fight or prevent COVID-19. So I don't feel bad for Zuckerberg because Zuckerberg has no problem telling a lot of us, this stuff here is actually for somebody else, or this stuff here is not for you, or this stuff here was copyrighted. Zuckerberg has no problem doing that. Maybe he should stick to the fact that he was told not to actually let COVID-19 misinformation get out there because of the potential damage it can cause. So sorry, Zuckerberg. Don't feel sorry for you. But what we should feel sorry for, guys, is that, again, with the Trump-Vance campaign out there, they're starting to attack black voters. They are starting to attack black voters. Why? Because, again, a lot of those out there, especially in conservative land, believe that Kamala Harris automatically has the black vote. And because of that, our strategy is, and this is how messed up the GOP strategy is, they go after the minority that they won't even allow in their own party to sit there and say, all of y'all can't be with her. Why? Because she's doing stuff like this. And again, this was just one of the videos they're moving forward with about Madam Vice President.
While you're focused on paying rent, buying groceries, putting gas in your car, Washington Democrats are coming after your menthol cigarettes. Yeah, you heard that right. Instead of solving the problems that matter to you, Kamala Harris and DC Democrats are coming after your menthol cigarettes. We got bigger problems to deal with. And so do Democrats. Tell Democrats to focus on what matters and stop trying to ban menthol cigarettes.
Again, that is paid for. Of course, you can see right there, guys. Paid for by Americans for Consumer Protection. Again, a group out there that is conservative and voting for Trump. And we talked about this, I want to say sometime, it might have been earlier this year or end of last year, where I sat there and said, I showed an example. Menthol cigarettes were always advertised to people of color. Whether it was Winston's, whether it was Salem's, whether it was Camel, and that's just a few of them. And the caricatures that came along there, that you saw black people only happy with a cigar in their hand, and menthols was like, black people with menthols. And I hate that because it's so stereotypical. But here's what's so stereotypical about it: that you have a political party out there that's sitting there going, you know what? Let's let these black people know, hey, these Democrats are trying to ban your menthol cigarettes, which again, a ban is needed. Why? Because again, smoking is not good for you. And they do the Surgeon General's warning on every packet. But when it comes down to it, they don't want the menthol that is created from this is doing more harm than good. So why not ban it? And of course, Republicans will sit there and say, see, black people, see what the Democrats are doing? They're taking away your menthol cigarettes. Even as I said it out loud, that is a terrible ass notion that black people would care. They truly do believe black people care more about their vices than the direction of this country. I say company, my bad. But again, that's just one. Here's the other one that Donald J. Trump is actually trying to move forward with, and it's directly from his YouTube page, as well as it's basically playing on TVs right now.
My name is Jasmine Woodson.
Hi, my name is Silla.
I'm Karen Watson. I'm Yolanda Johnson from Georgia.
This is BB Diamond from New York City.
I'm Dana Galen, and I'm from Tampa, Florida.
I live in Hagerstown, Maryland.
Out here in Maricopa County.
Kalamazoo County, Michigan.
I am a proud African immigrant living in Florida.
I'm from the great state of New Jersey.
I'm Angelina from Philly, and this November, I am not voting for Kamala Harris.
I am not voting for Kamala Harris.
I'm not voting for Kamala Harris.
I am not with Kamala Harris.
I am not with her.
I'm not with her.
I am not with Kamala Harris.
I'm not with Kamala.
I am not for Kamala. I am for Donald Trump.
I am not with Kamala.
I am not with her because she is not with me.
I support President Trump and the economic policies our country experienced under his leadership as our 45th president.
President Trump will support our law enforcement agencies and fund them appropriately.
Donald Trump made me proud to be an American.
I'm with Donald J. Trump.
We need a leader who can make America great again.
Trump puts Americans first, and he always will.
We need Donald Trump.
I and millions of other Black Americans will cast my vote for Donald J. Trump.
I will proudly cast my vote for Donald J. Trump as our next president.
Let's make America great again.
All I can sit there and say is, do you see this bullshit? And again, I'm trying to be nice about this, because the first when I saw this, I was like, this is what happens when you give AI options. Unfortunately, it's not AI. That people are making videos. Now, I will sit there and I'll be honest, it is hard to stomach. And I used to say this all the time. It's hard to stomach whether or not, when you hear a black person sit there and say that they're for Trump, do you believe them or are they in it for the payday? Because I still find it hard that black people, especially black women, would sit there and say, yeah, I'd vote for Trump. unless you are loaded, rich, or have a corporation, I don't see how he benefits you. But then there's the other side of it too, that all this could be just playing for a paycheck. Candace Owens does it. Various YouTube and influencers all do the same thing. They do it for the paycheck. They don't really believe in it, but I wouldn't be surprised. But at the same time, to see that and sit there and this is what they're doing says a lot about how they're trying to treat black voters. Like, I'm going to be honest, and this is going to be for both parties. I'm going to be very honest about this. Whether it's Republican or Democrat, you can tell the intention on how they actually walk up to black people and people of color. And again, I'm not trying to point straws. I'm not trying to be divisive, but you can tell in the approach. Now, of course, Kamala Harris, that is how you pronounce her name, which is surprising to me because how many times has her name been dissected, chopped, and screwed? It's not that freaking hard to say her name. But the fact that she talked about just last week about actually getting more homeowners in homes and building more homes is great versus what you're hearing now. Well, I don't stand with her because she doesn't stand with me. That is by far the most envious and asinine statements that you can make. And Trump believes, because again, there was that photo op where someone tried to stand and say Trump posed with beautiful black women who supported him, and that turned out to be a fake. I'm not saying this commercial could be the same, but at the same time, you're always going to find those of the ill-educated and misinformed that are going to go along with it. That's all I'm saying. But switching gears back to law enforcement and the reason why we need police reform, I think we're up to example 265 by now.
Outrage over this jaw-dropping video of an Ohio police officer kicking a kneeling man who appeared to be complying with their orders.
Oh! That cop still got out the car, ran to him, and drop-kicked him. Who does that? If I were to do that to you or anybody else, I'd be in jail.
Members of the public heated at a city council meeting, calling out what they say is a pattern of bad behavior by Canton police, including the recent death of Frank Tyson in their custody. Tyson was arrested after police say he ran from the scene of a car crash in April. Body camera video capturing an officer kneeling on his back while Tyson tells officers, "I can't breathe."
I can't breathe.
Tyson later seen motionless and unresponsive on the floor while still in handcuffs. The county coroner ruling his death a homicide. The two officers involved remain on paid administrative leave as the Ohio Attorney General reviews the case.
It's really hard to imagine that I represent 6 men, 3 dead and 3 living since 2022, January 1, that have been subjected to force, dog bite attacks, in this case, getting kicked in the head.
Attorney Bobby DiCello represents both Tyson's family and 21-year-old Jamir McElroy, the man seen kicked on camera. Police say he was part of a group reportedly arguing at this apartment complex over the weekend. Police say 2 pistols were recovered at the scene, and a backpack containing marijuana, cash, and scales were found in a nearby vehicle. McElroy was charged with resisting arrest following the incident. His lawyer says he was not part of the group police were called to investigate and that he did not resist.
The video demonstrates unequivocally that he's on his knees, his hands are in the air, and then he's kicked in the head.
DiCello says his client, who was hospitalized, is still dealing with the aftermath.
Jamir is traumatized. He received a concussion from what happened. He has swelling in his neck muscles and into his face, up to the jaw area.
The Canton police chief saying in a statement, officers ordered the suspects to the ground and they appeared to be complying when Officer Brandon Momaroff kicked Jamir McElroy in the chest, adding, officers using force outside the parameters of our training, policy, and principles will be held accountable.
I think it's a failure of leadership on every level. The leadership of the city needs to do something about it. They need to take swift and decisive action. They absolutely must terminate that officer.
Honestly, that officer should have been fired on the same day as that video came out. Because what other reason, and I'm just going to just throw this out there, what other reason could that man possibly have for what he did? The suspect was down. He was not armed, surrounded by other police officers. You still ran up and Spartan kicked the mess out of this man. And now it's like, oh, well, there needs to be an investigation. what's there to investigate? Because if he wasn't a threat to the officer on both sides of him, but the first officer did a running start, come up, and decide to just do a running drop kick on the guy, on an unarmed guy, you don't need to wear the badge anymore. Again, I will say this all the time when it comes to law enforcement, especially in Middle Tennessee, you train longer to be a plumber, you train longer to be a contractor, electrician, hairstylist, nail stylist, I'll even go as so far as gamer. You can do all those things, but at the same time, you'll still be waiting on the other shoe to drop. And again, with police enforcement, 6 months in the academy, you're out there protecting and serving. And the training is not up to snuff. It is not. That's just being honest. But yeah, guy should have been fired and really put in prison because you attacked an unknown man. And if he was, I'm just saying, if he was a black cop, he'd already be in jail on the fast food side of things. But want to cover the story as well because Lowe's had DEI efforts that they wanted to put in. And just like everybody else, they whine, they complain, they probably try to burn some cobalt tools. But Lowe's has sat there and said, you know what, we're going to pull back the DEI efforts, especially for LGBT plus groups. We're going to dial that back and really see if we can refine that. Because here's the thing I've always found so crazy. And I say this nicely because whenever it comes to LGBT plus or people of color, folks always have to seek that religion. Like, I just gotta pray about it before I can hire you. Really? I'm right here. I can test on anything else. But at the same time, they would rather still be that destructive and self-centered versus actually giving opportunity. That is all I'm saying whenever it comes to law enforcement. Because again, the video right there said it all. You kicked a guy, an unarmed guy who did not provoke you. You literally should have your gun and badge ready to go to drop off on your way to actually doing another interview because you've lost that police job. And we've been saying on this show, it needs to be better. It can be better. And yet it never does. But not surprised. A little quick bit of news before we get to our feel-good segment. Unfortunately, Supreme Court may have put President Biden's student loan plan, may have put it on ice because they have still yet to get back to it, citing a continuance. If you are in the Middle Tennessee area, guys, again, should be paying attention, especially with student loans, because student loans add up. For all those of us who are in the almost $100,000 area, you'll know what I'm talking about. But again, whenever it comes to that, especially with the save function, anything that'll actually help you and relieve you, because I still sit there and say student loan debt should be like medical debt. It should not be attached to your credit report because your credit report matters, especially credit in this country. And I don't mean to get preachy about that, but again, the world would be a whole lot better if your credit score was better, but the world could also be a whole lot harder if your credit score is in the toilet. At the same time, President Biden's SAVE plan would have actually alleviated. I know in this podcast, I've sat there and said, it's not enough. You know, you kind of played it safe. We should have went for the whole wipe down. I get it. You can only do with the crumbs you got. But the fact that the Texas judge, again, Texas, it's always freaking Texas, is trying to put the hold on this, lets you know exactly what they think about your child actually having student loan debt, which again, should be alarming, but hey, we'll be here. So we're going to go ahead and get on to our feel-good segment, guys, because usually our feel-good segment, how the Frack We Got Here, we usually cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes I make you use your faith in humanity, but hey, it's Wednesday. Today is hump day. Tomorrow is Friday Eve, which is Thursday, and we will leave you guys out some good vibrations. And this guy, again, it never ceases to amaze me that despite one's circumstances, we can do some amazing things. And this violinist did just that.
Now on GMA with a talented musician who refused to let anything get in the way of his dreams, giving a notable performance overnight and inspiring others to showcase their skills. ABC's Perry Russum is here with more. Perry, good morning.
Mary, good morning to you. Adrian and Antoine says he does not let his disability define him. He is a musician first, striving to become the best version of himself.
At this church in Boston Friday night, Adrian and Antoine center stage, a soloist joining the orchestra.
My duty and job is to use this platform in some way to show folks what a person with a visible disability can do.
Born without a hand, Adrian picked up the recorder as a boy. He struggled to play with only 5 fingers.
I felt very different as a young child and felt isolated and struggled to find a sense of belonging.
He connected with the violin, doctors creating a cast allowing him to hold the bow, the technology evolving as he's gotten older.
I use a device called a spatula. It's a plaster cast that has a tongue at the very end, and then I just slip the bow onto that.
Born in Toronto, music has taken Adrian around the world, from stages to classrooms.
You never know who's watching in the audience or who will be moved or inspired to be able to make a change in their lives.
There is an equalizing with music, where it doesn't matter what you look like, what you have or don't have. What matters is your sound.
It's about the soul and the heart and being able to express that in ways that connect to another human being.
And then Adrian also has a music inclusion ensemble at the Berklee College of Music in Boston, where he's a teacher. It's made up of students who also have disabilities. And I asked him if he has a message about music. He says when you make a wrong note or any type of mistake, it's not about that, but how you respond afterward.
At this point, that's the reason why I love stories like that, because it is hard not to sit there and not be inspired from a guy who did not let his disadvantage be his handicap. Again, I always love that and always been a fan of the violin. Will I ever play it? Absolutely not. I gotta learn my limitations somewhere. But anyway, that's gonna do it for this podcast, guys. We thank you all for liking, watching, letting me know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before I do get out of here. That was a terrible segue. BlurStation.com. We keep talking about this, guys. It is the vehicle, it is the table, the place where our content can be shown and people like us for us can enjoy it. BlurStation.com. If you get there and you actually want to join up, guys, please hit the join now button. Select the Blur's Eye View Affinity membership. Select my name, Black Spartan, there. I would certainly appreciate it. But again, $10.99 a month allows you to watch Blur Station on all devices, including your smart device if you have one. At the same time, guys, after 36 months, you can actually, after 36 months of paying $10.99 a month, you actually will be able to own a piece of Blur Station. A lot easier than going through E-Trade or Fidelity Investments, buying a small amount of stock for a large number. Wow, that did not work out well. Anyway, BlurStation.com. Check it out. As far as me, guys, Black_Spartan 615 on the socials. Again, shows can be found wherever shows can be seen or heard, whether it's Facebook or YouTube. You can definitely find us there at How the Frack We Got Here. Also, APR TV, Always Record TV. The show that, of course, you're currently watching actually shows there as well, which can be on smart devices, including Roku. Again, the Always Press Record app. You'll thank me for it. I really do. At the same time, guys, I really got to stress this again. We are at this level of acting, of enactment, of getting involved, and things of that nature. The things that we should be doing that need to be done. A reason being because, again, I talked about this. We just saw it in Georgia where they empowered themselves. They have empowered themselves to take over and view the election if it doesn't go their way. So what do we need to do? I highly recommend that you guys go to vote.org. Again, vote.org is crucial. Tells the days until election day. You will be able to check your registration. Register to vote. Vote by mail if you fit the conditions. Again, vote.org can help you out tremendously if you are a voter, a new voter, a current or registered voter, so that way you know exactly where to go. Because if you don't think for 1 second these individuals will not try to sit there and say, you can't vote here, you don't have this, or you can't do this. Because trust me, they will. And they will use that to every advantage that they can. So again, if you haven't already, check out vote.org. Please get registered, get other people registered. If voting wasn't so crucial, they would not be trying to move heaven and earth to make it harder for you. That is all I'm saying. But the last thing we'll say about How the Frack We Got Here, it's all about being informed. The simple fact of the matter is, guys, we need to move forward. We need to be engaged. And the only way we can do that is because we're informed. When we're informed, we're progressive. We move forward. We try to right the wrongs of our past by making decisions now that we should have done back then, like electing our first Black woman Supreme Court, electing our first Black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, and hopefully 68 days less from now, electing our first Black woman to be called Madam President. All great things. We don't learn from history. We are doomed to repeat them. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go about our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians, but still same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the frack we got here. Thank you all for watching, guys. Please take care of yourselves and each other. Please get involved and vote and help others vote. And I promise you we'll get through this. Peace.